And we are live on the Icecast Live. Good evening, Andy. How you doing, mate?
Evening, Shane. Nice to see you, mate.
And you.
Bit of a sad day today for our community, isn't it?
It is, mate. It is. I know a lot of people watching this will be aware, but some might not. But Dave Evans, also known as Bolt 01, he was a letterer, a publisher, a creator. Just an all-round great guy as well. Has passed away, and we're really missing him already, aren't we, Andy?
Yeah, I mean, I told a friend of mine that I collaborate with, Daniel Whiston, and he's devastated. He's a good old friend of Dave's. I mean, I was in the middle of, well, I am in the middle of doing a Strontium Dog strip for Dog Breath that he was going to letter. You know, the deadline is this month, so we don't know. Not heard from the rest of the guys. Is it going to go ahead or?
Yeah. I mean, it's tough for Richmond as well. He's the publishing partner, isn't it? Because he's got to deal with all that. And, you know, and also close friend as well. And it's just a massive gap that's being left in his wake. I mean, he did so much for the UK indie scene. I mean, he was an inspiration to me early on when I first started. Hey, James. How you doing, man? Yeah, it's just really sad. It's far too soon. And we're all going to miss him so much. I mean, the work he did with Future Quake, I remember seeing that early on and just being really inspired by that. It showed how, you know, professional small press books could look even back then. You know,
they would pull in, you know, artists from the prog to do the covers and you know. But he lettered me on Brawler. And I was really looking forward to collaborating. Well, we had 3 strips we're going to do this year, but we just everyone needs to find out what you know with his legacy.
Yeah, and what a hell of a legacy! Big legacy, you know. And I always remember, you know, every time I was at a convention, especially you know, get those conventions where you might not know many people there. It's just like a bit of an odd one. If Dave was there, great, you could have a chat. A friendly face, someone you could talk to all day. You know, a great table neighbor at a con, you know, just an all-round lovely guy, and just we're all going to miss him. I mean, the outpourings on social media today have been massive, haven't they?
I mean, it obviously started small with one. I think it was Mike Carroll announced it on a forum, and then it's gone all the way to 2000 AD themselves. Sending their regards. So that's how much of the community he was.
He was an integral part of it, and you know, our sympathies go out to his close friends and family. And we're very sorry to see what's happened. So I say it's a sad start, but we do. I think
we just wanted to pay tribute.
We did. We couldn't really start the show without mentioning it, to be honest.
He was also Steve Tanner's one of his go-to letterers as well for Time Bomb. Time Bomb is the publisher that we're dealing with tonight.
Exactly. That's a good segue, actually, Andy.
It's like we do this. Like we do this all the time. We can't cut this bit though. It's live.
No, it's not. That's the thing. So we're talking to Roger Gibson and Vincent Danks tonight, who have a new Harker book on Kickstarter, and you are involved in the book as well, aren't you, Andy?
Yeah. I was asked by Steve to be the colorist. So originally they were produced, was it probably 10 years ago as black and white comics, and Steve published volume 1 of the Book of Solomon, and the Book of Two is now live on Kickstarter a week through. Already smashed its target.
Yeah, amazing.
As a lot of our friends on Kickstarter have been doing, and a lot of the guys on here do fantastic on, you know, the 77 Blazer Sentinel. You know, all those guys done fantastic on Kickstarter. Indie comics
are really killing it at the moment.
It's just because there's so much passion behind them. So much passion. They're great fun. And there's, you know, we can do whatever you want. You know, there's no publisher per se.
No.
There's no sort of Disney or whoever. No barriers.
No corporate barriers. No you know, message that they're trying to get across. It's just, this is from the creator of the creators to you. And that's the great thing about comics.
Talking to even just 100 backers, you know, to get 100 of the books out. But back in the day, if you sold 100 of a small press comic, you're doing quite well.
Yeah,
and now
definitely.
It's sort of like it's the norm.
Yeah,
to get 100 backers plus, you know,
it's coming.
People like the 77 get up far higher.
It's coming back around, isn't it? It's coming back around. So we will be welcoming Roger and Vincent shortly. Sam, can you please play the VT and we'll get right into it. Good evening and welcome to the Icecast, guys.
Evening, gentlemen. Nice to see you.
So we're here to talk about the new Harker book, which, can you explain to us the concept of Harker? Well, not to us, because we actually know. Andy knows really well because he colours the damn thing. So can you explain to our viewers what Harker is about, what the concept is?
Harker is essentially a detective crime show on TV. It's like Inspector Morse, it's like Columbo, and we're doing that as a comic. But it's essentially, the intention of it is that it's just exactly like one of those old TV shows that you see on a Saturday night or Wednesday night ITV. Where an hour-long show which would have one mystery, one murder to solve. And you get to enjoy the same detective each week. They're going out and solving it. So that's pretty much what Harker is. It's a TV detective show as a comic.
I like that idea. And which shows in particular influenced it? You know, there must be some that you draw from, or is it a wide range of TV shows?
It's kind of a mix. Columbo is the starting point of it for me, because I'm a huge fan of Columbo. And Inspector Morse is a big part of it as well. You use various references too, because you watched all of those shows.
Yeah, quite a few. Yeah, Midsummer Murders was quite a reference as well. Although we needed to up the body count, I think, to be like Midsummer Murders. But yeah, any of them, just because they all follow a fairly similar pattern anyway. So yeah, it was just to capture that because nobody else was really doing it. So we thought that would be a good idea.
Yeah.
No, I don't think anyone else is doing it at all. It's a really unique idea, and artistically, it has a very specific style, doesn't it? There's a lot, you know, you use reference. It's very realistic. Was that intentional to go with the idea of it looking like a TV show? Was that from the start? Was that the way that you wanted to go with it?
Well, yeah, it was. I mean, partly because. I tend to use reference anyway for my work, but with it being based on this TV show idea, that worked well with it, and I took it a bit further as well. Particularly the first book, I used actors from episodes of Morse and Inspector Murder as references to the characters. Yes, just partly out of fun, just to see if anybody kind of noticed that. In fact, one guy did say, "Oh, I recognise that actor." And I thought, "Oh, that's good." but the two characters, Harker and Critchley, are actually based on me and Rog, and that was really just partly for fun and partly because it was easy to get the photo reference.
Yeah, and no, you must say that the lead characters do look very handsome.
Yeah. Well, we had to make them look a little bit more ugly.
Yes,
just more realistic. Yeah.
But
and what was this scene here? This is from the first book, is it?
Well, actually, that page of artwork, there is a kind of shot like that in the first one as well, but that's actually from book 2.
Right.
Well, it'll be it's the original book 2, but it'll be book 3 part 1 when Time Bomb do it.
That's an adventure movie.
So just to clarify for our viewers, because there's a little bit of a history with the book, isn't there? Because it's not always been with Time Bomb. So can you just take us through the history of the book, where it's been published, and how the stories break down in parts?
It's kind of long and entangled. The original idea came from a strip that I did in one of Vince's anthology books called Raven, where I did a strip at the back called Griffin. And it was a photo strip because I'm rubbish at drawing. And it was a bit useless, but we quite like the idea of it. And Vince wanted to do it as a proper strip. We decided to launch it as a comic, and we did it for 12 issues, 12 monthly issues.
That was self-published
issues.
Right. Okay.
Called Harker. Titan Comics liked it, and they asked if they could publish it too. And it was, yeah, of course you can. So they did a hardback version of the first 6 issues.
Right.
Like 7 or 8 years, 9 years on, Time Bomb were doing a colour version of it for the first time. So there's two completely graphic novels at the moment. There's the one that you're showing there, which is the performance. That's been split into 2 issues of Time Bomb, and then the next one, which is also complete, just needs colouring, is the Black Hound. And that will be again split into 2 by Time Bomb.
Wow, there's quite a lot of there's a lot of pages there. It's quite ambitious, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, there's 120 pages for each book, so it's about 60 pages for each of the Time Bomb issues. So it's pretty good. There's a lot of material that's already been published years ago that is being reprinted. After that's all been finished, we're then going to be doing new Harker after that. So
but you're in a great position that you've got such an archive of work that can just be remastered, as it were, and brought to a new audience.
We had such a lot finished, so you can launch it straight away. You just need to splash some colour in there and launch it. I think he liked that idea. He was a fan of it anyway. So
well, it's also I think it builds up I think there are people who remember it from 10 years ago. New people come into it as well, and obviously Time Bomb have got some established readers. So there's new people coming to it, and after the first, as Rod says, after the first 2 books, we'll do a new one. Sorry, well, it'll be 4 books. And then there'll be a new book, which I think we should do in 27 parts, just to confuse people.
Yeah, well, you'll have to draw it though. That's the problem.
It'll only be 4 pages, but done in 27 parts.
Yeah.
But
the idea
is a page.
The idea of it is very much, as well as being a detective thriller, we're also taking things out of those old 80s and 90s thrillers and trying to use them in peculiar ways. So in the next Whitby book, we have Harker go on holiday in Whitby, because we always thought the worst episodes of those old shows were like your Columbo goes on holidays to England, or Marple goes on holidays to Blackpool or something. They're always terrible. That's what we want to do a good one of those.
They just happen to find a dead body.
They're so unlucky, aren't they? Or lucky, whichever way you look at it. I always used to think that. Well, Murder She Wrote was the other one that I always used to watch. That woman is cursed.
Bodies trailing behind her.
Yeah, I think she must have been the killer, really.
She was, definitely. Yeah. But I think we thought early. I don't know what point we thought it, but rather than, because in fact, pretty much all the TV shows tend to be based in one place. I mean, like Inspector Morse, Oxford was almost one of the characters. Whereas we thought, no, we want to actually move them around a bit so we don't be bored with the same location. They're kind of roving detectives, which actually reduces the silliness of like, oh god, it's yet another murder. Great one at the moment is that there's one set on a Caribbean island, like the Death in Paradise. Caribbean island, and they have literally have a murder everywhere. There must have been half the population.
Deadly. Yeah, I definitely wouldn't want to go on holiday there. You got a really good chance of carking it, haven't you, while you're on holiday?
Yeah, but that's the second story. Is set in Whitby, so we move them around a bit. The new one, are we allowed to plug the new one at this stage?
We do, yeah.
The new one's going to be set in Port Merion. Yeah.
Ah, cool.
All right. Cool.
Well, that's a good opportunity to draw some interesting architecture, isn't it?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Murder amongst spies, obviously.
Harker 4K. Harker 4K, not Barker 4K. That's the comment we got from James there. I think there's a typo on the first comment. Thanks for that, James. So, a question I need to ask then is, what time period is Harker set in?
Now, effectively.
Right, it is modern. Okay.
It's happening pretty much now. It was drawn, the first book was drawn 10 years ago. So you could say that's set into 2010, but they're all now. It's all happening right now. We've new features slightly older Harker and Critchley in videos, just from other books, but essentially they'll always be the same age, and they'll always be set now.
Yeah. So
is that confusing comparison, isn't there, with Life on Mars? Because it's not.
Yeah.
It's not at all with the Gene Hunt sort of character.
Yeah, Harker is partly based on I can't remember what it was called.
Gene Hunt.
Gene Hunt.
Yeah. Gene Hunt. Yeah.
Gene Hunt. It's like a cross between Gene Hunt and me and Vince and Columbo, all mushed together.
That's an interesting combination. So so Harker breaks the rules a bit then? He's a bit of a rogue, is he? A rogue copper? He
isn't. I wanted him to be quirky because people like detectives with quirks. All the best detectives have good quirks. So I wanted him to have various little quirks. So he has those. He's not especially rebellious as such, but he doesn't carry around a phone. He's very old-fashioned. Is much more of a contemporary cop. So there's that switch between them as well. So he's old-fashioned. He's not necessarily a rebel, but he does things the old way. A bit like Gene Hunt, as badly as that.
But then you've got Critchley as well, who's slightly different.
He's meant to be more of the update copper. He has his phone and his technology and his computers and stuff, and he has his own methods, which work against Harker's more I don't know, just more gut feeling. Harker's more of a gut feeling guy. Critchley is more of a do this by the method and do it right and cross the eyes.
And it's important, I think, isn't it, for lead characters to have flaws,
Yeah.
It's without the flaws, it's hard to relate to them, isn't it? If they're just perfect people, you need those human flaws.
Absolutely. I mean, Harker's in his 50s. He's not very fit. He chain smokes. He's grumpy. He's a little bit peculiar. He's got eccentricities, and I think all of that plays into the character and plays into the way the murders are handled. So I think that's a bit of mystery about it.
Well, the comparison, because I mean, Harker is basically a grumpy git. Critchley's always kind of positive and happy. So but that complements each other. So they're supposed to be very different. Hopefully they come across.
I think all the great detective partnerships do have that element, don't they? Where they're trying to achieve the same goals, but in very different ways, and that makes it interesting.
Yeah, and that harks back to me and Vince, because me and Vince, I'm the grumpy one, and Vince is the cheerful one. Vince is the one who everybody likes and has many friends, whereas I'm just quite happy sitting quietly with a cup of tea and not talking to anybody. So it kind of reflects that too, because there's bits of me and Vince in there. Sometimes Mark will say something that Vince might have said to me before. Sometimes Critchley might say something that I've said, but we're in the characters too, so it makes it kind of autobiographical, even though we're obviously not solving murders.
Never been in the police.
So a bit of a fantasy then, really.
Well, again, I mean, obviously, as a writer. Apparently, but you'll kind of write what you know, so of course that makes it easier to make the characters more believable, I suppose. So
We have a question from Steve Prowse. I loved Harker, but I've got the black and white hardback. I'd be more up for a sequel, although I love the look of the coloured editions. What are the chances?
There is going to be a sequel. If you've got the first one, he probably hasn't read the Whitby stories. That's coming out next. That's already off. That's all finishing and blinked and done. Then after that, there's going to be brand new sequels ongoing. So as I said, the first one will be in Port Merion. The next one, possibly New York, we were talking about. We're not sure yet. Maybe Liverpool. So it's going to be ongoing. So we're getting the reprints out of the way first of all, because a lot of people haven't seen them before, and then moving on to new stuff straight after. Again, with time bomb.
But it is moving pretty quickly. You know, the rate that Steve publishes. You know, I'm sure there'll be another book along later on this year.
Wow.
Indeed, yeah. It's not just the colouring time for Andrew, because you know, everything else is all done. So, but Andrew needs time to get it coloured.
Yeah.
So it sounds like I'm on the next book then.
Well, actually, Steve was asking for pages for the new one. So yeah, they'll be with you soon.
I'll be up for it. No, because what I'd like to say is because I worked so closely with them, the amount of detail. I mean, we all love comics and we can, you know, we draw in and whatever. But I was so absorbed in the storytelling, even though I was doing them, spending like whatever, an hour per page or however long it took me. You just get absorbed into it, and there's a lot of lovely detail. There's no sort of erroneous bits that put you off that you can get sometimes in small press.
Well, thanks. That's good, because I mean, because originally it was done as a monthly comic. So we were constrained time wise, which wasn't. I mean, the stuff I've worked on subsequently, there's been no real deadline, so my work's actually got more detailed, and
right.
With Harker, it was constrained, so which may be a good thing.
Well, having said that, the Whitby story that we did, by the time we got to that one, we were producing an issue. You drawing it within 3 to 4 weeks.
Oh yeah, we did stick to the monthly deadline for the whole 12-issue run.
Yeah.
So it's nice that you think it's detailed. We liked your colouring as well, by the way.
Yeah, thank you.
It's a bloody good job, isn't it?
I didn't want to go too far away from the original book. I wanted them to sit very similar. But it was, you know, we were saying earlier about a 50-year-old man, but for God's sakes, he wears Converse. How many 50-year-old men wear Converse?
Cool ones.
I'm kind of in that age range. I'm in the mid-50s and I wear Converse.
I'll be buried in my Converse, I think.
Well, it was actually when we first started. I mean, Rog basically wore what he normally wore.
Even that jacket.
Even that jacket was just his. Right. Yeah, I was a country character. I hate wearing suits, so doing the photo references for me is horrible. But
it was a jacket. I've actually lost the original Harker jacket. Well, I haven't lost it. It's still tucked away in some clothes somewhere. But I was walking home one evening, it's about 5-6 years ago, and it had been raining the day before, and a bird's nest fell on my back. Hit my back, splurged black stuff all over the back of the jacket.
Oh, lovely.
After that.
Oh no, it's just been stuck in a box since then.
Yeah, it was sabotaged by a bird's nest.
Oh God, well, Harker's going to have a new outfit, I think.
Yes,
a new jacket for Harker. Yeah.
New jacket. Well, I don't think you've got those jeans and Converses anymore.
No, I haven't. No, I'll have to get them out.
Yeah, God.
And because you guys obviously, you know, are the models for the characters, and you're intending to keep them, I assume, at a certain age, does that mean, Vincent, that you're going to have to take like lots of reference shots now before you sort of get too old?
Yeah. Or require a couple of paintings of us so we can hide in an attic somewhere.
Yeah.
But
we're too old anyway, Fedgy, because Critchley's supposed to be in his 30s, isn't it?
Yes, So I'll just have to de-age us more as we go along.
You use special technology for that, don't you? To de-age the wrinkles and then spray the beard on.
Yeah. Well, the reality is when we get too old, we won't even be able to pose for the references, so we'll give up at that point.
Yeah.
That's a long way off, I hope, mate. It's a long way off.
That's what they do in TV. Get some new actors.
Yeah, look, Roger, you have to stand up and see. I can't stand up.
Before you know it, it'll be Harker the next generation. You know, two young punks. That'd be quite an interesting story, actually.
Harker's son takes over.
That'd make him even more grumpy, wouldn't it? If some youngster takes over and he's just like semi-retired cop.
It'd be like in Minder when they got rid of Terry and brought in,
and everybody stopped watching.
Yeah.
Well, it comes on an afternoon. And you're like, hey, Minders. Oh,
who's that bloke?
Not the one with Dennis Waterman.
It's not Dennis. If it's not Dennis Waterman, it's not Minder, is it? No,
stupid.
Bloody hell! I mean, the other guy didn't write the theme tune and sing the theme tune.
He wanted to, but they wouldn't let him.
Yeah.
But it's still got Arthur and it's still got Dave in it. So
if it appears, it never would have all gone horribly wrong for all the other series.
No,
because people now know intrinsically if a new character comes in, that's scrappy do. Let's stop watching it.
Yeah,
that's how it goes.
Yeah, it's really hard sometimes to introduce new characters and for people to instantly like them. I mean, how many times have you watched a series on TV and some new punk comes in and it's like, don't like him? Just take an instant dislike to them.
You do, and that is normal. I suppose they kind of they bucked that trend with Doctor Who, but it doesn't normally work. But I think, like, again, Death in Paradise is weird because they do keep the character, and yet people still keep watching it.
Yes,
they do have a rich pool of characters,
where they did that, where they had a new character coming who was like a dog, a happy dog, and hey kids, and he rode on a surfboard, and he came out at the end of the episode.
Yeah, well, they were taking the piss.
They were.
Nothing more annoying than a really happy character, is there?
Yes, absolutely.
So, I had another question. It's gone in my head. That's right. Andy, how did you get involved in the project? How were you recruited?
Basically, Steve just asked me.
There
he said, "Do you fancy?" That was it. Because I'd done Keiko Panda for Brawler and done coloured my own work. And he just said, "Do you think you'll be able to do 60 pages colouring?" And I think if you sit down, it's actually quite a daunting task. I mean, especially because it's a very popular book. But I use the iPad Pro, so it's all coloured directly on an iPad Pro,
right?
And it worked very well. I had the previous book as reference as a colour guide, and just sat down numerous evenings. I think it started at Christmas and then finished. I think it took me a couple of months. So the deadline was end of March. So but as I said, it was a joy to work on. I mean, you have to basically
you worry about it, like if you're because obviously you're colouring over another artist's work. So presumably you must sort of in the back of your mind, are they going to like this? Is he going to think I've ruined it?
Not that you thought that.
I mean, all I did was I did a couple of test pages to start with. And Steve got me to correct a few things, and I think he sent them to you guys. And you were like, "Yeah, it's fine." So you just carry on.
Yeah,
you just, how did the previous colorist color that character or color that, the sky, and the buildings? Can we simplify it? Can we make it, so it doesn't intrude with the story? Because it's basically what, as we know with any comics, the reader doesn't want to know it's been lettered or colored or even drawn. You just want to read the story and enjoy the piece. It's like, you don't really want to know the cinematographer or the Foley artist on a TV show. You want to see the prisoner, or you want to see Morse, or you just trust everybody else around to deliver the goods. But I think it's a fantastic idea of Steve's. Well, was it who actually came up with the idea of getting it coloured, of getting it remastered, as it were?
It was Steve.
He wanted to justify it being published again, because it had been published twice already, or 3 times. We did a captive version of it ourselves too, so this will be the 4th time around. And he wanted to justify that by making it different, by making it more special. So,
but it doesn't. Right, I don't want to be rude, but it doesn't seem like money for old rope. It does seem very sort of reverential and taking a classic indie book and giving it a
new life.
The 2021 version.
Well, the thing is, I mean, obviously, when we were originally doing it, most indie stuff was in black and white because that's all you could really afford. Whereas it seems to be that it's all pretty much in color anyway. So everything Steve publishes seems to be in color. So I suppose he also thought, well, we don't want it jarring with the rest of his publications. But I don't know. That's just printing's a lot cheaper these days. Color printing.
I mean, you get a quote for color and quote for black and white, and it's nominal, really.
Yeah,
you'll probably find that they just run the black and white through the color printer.
Yeah,
as it were. A lot of the digital printing.
There's no difference really
for low print runs.
Especially when you've got books with color and black and white in them, the printer will always just say, "Well, it's all color." We're not going to separate the process. That's going to be a right pain in the arse, so it doesn't really make much difference anymore.
Yeah, like in the old free magazines, you'd get a color advert or a black and white advert is cheaper.
Kickstarter justifies it being put into colour anyway. We're making enough money on Kickstarter to produce in colour, so I know.
Yeah, definitely. And about you're saying before about it's been released 4 times, but indie books, they always can use more readers. It doesn't matter. I mean, the first time, if you I don't know, have 1,000 people read it, 2,000 people read it. I mean, there's a lot of people in the world who can still read this book. I mean, it's not like it was not like it was a mass. It sold millions and it's saturated. There's still so many people who can discover this book.
Yeah,
that's right. Yeah, and even the Titan version, which kind of had a bigger distribution than our version. Even that, there was just one run. I don't know what the print run was, but that apparently sold out. But once they didn't do any more, and even that's going back a few years. So presumably there are new readers, new people coming onto the comic scene. So you're right. There's always new people who you can try and flog it to.
It's not a new thing for because From Hell was originally in Taboo. Wasn't it? So it was run in Taboo to start with, and then it was in its own sort of long-winded. It was multiple publishers, and then reprinted in in the big, thick graphic novel, and then they recolored it. So so it's it's quite a standard thing with something that has legs.
I mean, in the case of From Hell, just going on to that, I personally myself, I still prefer the black and white of that book. I think the artwork was intended to be black and white. It was drawn to be black and white, so it just feels that like it should be. It's a bit like the new Walking Deads. I mean, I'm sure Charlie would curse me for this, but I really like the black and white.
They were designed for black and white. I mean, especially From Hell, because they were meant to look like of the time. We perceive the Victorian times to be in black and white.
Even though they weren't.
Even though they weren't,
funny, isn't it? Because all the reels were. It's a while ago. There were some films released of Victorian times, early films, and in colour, and they treated them and they'd slowed them down to make them look more contemporary, and they coloured them. And it was so strange to see what we're so used to seeing, walk in that sort of funny way that they walk on the old films, and
with an umbrella.
Parasol. In colour as they actually were. To look into the past like that, I found that so fascinating.
Funny enough, they look just like us.
I
don't think we've evolved that much in 100 years.
There is this idea, isn't there, that we're really different now. We've evolved in 100, 200 years, but there's nothing happens in that time. That's not even a tick on the clock, is it?
You walk around like that.
There'll be old films of us soon, won't there? Of us like walking around looking at our phones. Look at those weirdos looking at their phones.
He's promoting Walking Dead now. That's the wrong book.
Hey, they don't need any promotion. Bloody hell, Sam.
Look, Charlie's made another £100.
Yeah, could you? Are you guys fans of The Walking Dead?
No, I do like zombie films very much. I've never gone to The Walking Dead.
No, I haven't actually.
Right.
No. Yeah.
Do you mean the TV show or the comic?
No.
Yeah, but well, either.
Yeah, I mean, I'm asking about the comic, but
the comic.
Yeah.
It is a cracking comic. I mean, again, Charlie managed to do it every bloody month. 24 pages or whatever it was.
Yeah,
what was incredible. 10 plus years? No, more than that.
16, wasn't it? 16 years. Yeah.
You know, size now. So if you want to get into it, and you start at the beginning, you've got all that massive amount of graphic novels to get through, and it looks like a bit of a hurdle. So I haven't bothered with it.
Yeah, right. It is a lot. I mean, if you wanted to read all those books, whoa, yeah, it's a lot to read, but it is good stuff. It is. I would recommend it. Vince, with your style, obviously, it's a lot more detailed than, say, you know, a Walking Dead or something like that. There's a lot of work that goes into it. Obviously, you use reference. You have to set it. Do you have to set up shots, or are you able to just take the basic reference for the likenesses and then you design all the shots and everything yourself?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, obviously, depending on the setting. I mean, the first book's being set in London, so I went to London and took photographs of the area that it was set in. So the more references I've got, the better. And then it's just adapting it to
you use your storyboard as well. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, I will storyboard it first, and then I'll match the reference to the storyboards.
Yeah.
If I'll make it up, but it's yeah.
A question I wanted to ask is, I mean, obviously the last year we've been locked down, ridiculously locked down. Have you done any Harker? Because you guys, you've got the reference there. You know, you could have just rattled out more Harker books, and then just throw in.
Apart from the new covers that Steve wanted.
Yeah.
No, because well, I mean, I've been working on other stuff up till now, so I haven't had the time.
But because it's so, what's trying to allude to, it's so
Girl, which we're also doing for Time Bomb, and so we're doing a bit on that. But Vince is still tied up with a different graphic novel that you're doing for someone else.
Yeah.
But we've been working on that, but not Harker. But because there's no new Harker due apart from the week we're working next for another year, so we've got plenty of time.
Right.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
And so I missed the title of the new thing you're doing with Steve. What was that called?
Mad Girl.
Yeah.
Ah, cool. I think, do we have some artwork of that, Sam, that we can show people? Is Sam even online at the moment, or is he?
So is that one that you were drawing, Roger?
No, Vince is doing the first issue
to
launch it, and then a friend of mine called Mark Wayne Barrett is going to be drawing it from issue 2 onwards.
Well, you have done some artwork for it.
Yeah, I'm doing a backup strip for it, but the first issue will be Vince again. He's done insane backgrounds and really detailed stuff for it.
But you haven't got any of that, I don't think, at the moment.
I think, a couple of the pages are by Vince. There's a page of her driving through the centre of London. That's by Vince. And a page of getting ready and having a breakfast and stuff. That's another one of Vince's shots as well. So they'll both be in issue 1. So that'll be the first one of those out. So we're working on Harker and Mad Girl kind of concurrently.
And what's the can you tell us a little bit about what the story is, what the character is?
It's kind of a hark back to those old many American spy movies from the early 1970s. Things like Matt Dean Martin and stuff like that. In crazy adventures with rocket ships and aliens and robot girls and all that sort of stuff. It's a big action adventure, kind of slight piss take, I suppose, but not too much. And it's sexy, and it's fun, and it's action packed, isn't it? It's all those kind of things. It's trying to pile all the things that we love about adventure movies and James Bond movies and Matt Helm movies, all those things, and pile that into a big mush in the same way that Harker's a mush of detective stuff. So it's
it couldn't be more different to Harker, which is
it's kind of like 1960s Avengers is the closest to me, probably. That's
cool,
what that's
cool.
But with much bigger guns.
Yes.
And an unlimited budget because it's drawn.
Yeah.
Whatever you want in there.
Yeah.
It's all down to the writer going, draw me all of the world. I want it all in one panel. Everybody ever.
Yeah, with horses and armies, please.
Yeah.
Yeah, the giant underground base was a bit alarming when Roger first mentioned it, but I don't know, where am I going to get reference shots for that?
I said, Vince, we need a giant underground base for issue 1. He said, how am I going to do that? I said, I don't know how you do your drawing. That's your business.
Take your pencil.
So yeah.
Oh, brilliant. I assume there's going to be some ninjas.
Ninjas. I mean,
you've got to have ninjas. You've got to have some ninjas. It's essential.
At some point. Yeah.
Well, that sounds really awesome.
Most issue 1 is robots, schoolgirls, giant robots, and ridiculously large flying machines and UFOs and stuff. Mostly.
Yeah. If I remember rightly.
So we couldn't quite fit ninjas into issue 1. But,
that's it. I'm not buying it if it hasn't got ninjas in it.
Vince, I wanted to ask you, do you do your work digitally? Have you started working digitally, or do you still do it?
I have more. Obviously, because I'm so old, when I first started, it was traditional pencils and pen and ink.
Lightbox.
But it was a kind of gradual transition. I then I carried on with the pencil work, but then I'd scan it into the computer and ink it digitally. And now I just do it all digitally. It's just easier. The only slight drawback is that more recent stuff. There's no physical artwork. So because Steve's got some artwork from Harker to sell, original pages, the pencils. And that's obviously useful, but latterly there won't be anything.
So the Book of Solomon, was that drawn traditionally then inked on a computer?
Well, the pencils were drawn traditionally, and then it was inked on it. Yeah, in fact, the second book, all 12 issues were drawn, penciled and then scanned in and inked digitally.
Because obviously the beauty now is that you can just take your photos, drop back the opacity if you want, and trace them if you wanted to.
Yeah. Well,
don't do that.
It's all about the speed, though. I mean, as you're saying, if you've got an issue to do a month, you've got to get your corners to cut.
You've got to be quick.
I think a problem with reference look is the stiffness. Where that photo shoots often look stiff because people are and stuff, never look natural. Vince has got a talent for making it all flow, making it feel like it's moving, and that's pretty crucial.
Well, that's because, as you said, you storyboard it first.
Yeah,
you draw it in pencil, and then you're looking for your reference.
Yeah, I think that's the key, isn't it? Is to get that movement in storytelling before you even go to the reference stage. Otherwise, like Roger says, you've just got lots of stiff figures acting, and it just doesn't look right, does it? I mean,
after a while, you learn what is a good reference. You can look at a photo and think, well, if I use that as a reference and draw it, it's not going to work. Whereas other photos will. So it's just something you kind of learn, I suppose, as you go along.
I mean, one of the first things we were taught at art school was keep reference, keep a scrapbook, keep a whatever, keep a folder, keep a file.
Before, haven't we? Yeah.
We just used to fill up books of just tearing it out of different magazines and whatever. But
is that something you do? Is it, Vince? Do you keep a reference file?
I do, but obviously nowadays it's not so much tearing things out of magazines as Google searching. But if I come across different images, I think, oh, that'll work for something. Yeah, I'll keep it. But you obviously, because obviously photography can be wrong. The camera lenses distort things, and things look odd. They might look great in the photo, but if you try and it won't work. So you'd have to be a bit careful, but. A good photo reference is very useful.
But it's great. I mean, we've all, well, I believe you've also worked with John Short. So I've worked quite a lot with John, and when he writes scripts now, he'll be like, Google it. It's like, and he was wearing a specific uniform, Google it. Or, you know, a car or a plane or something. It's just go to Google.
Yeah, there's no excuse for not getting things accurate now.
Yeah,
no, like guns and things like that. That's some fans as well are really into their guns, aren't they? And if you've got the wrong gun,
that'd be like a Commando comic in Commando. If you,
I mean, if I was writing out, I'd just say to him, he's got a big gun now, and he'd say, "What sort of gun?" I'd say, "I don't know, just a big gun." And then he'd say, "What sort of gun that is?" It tends to be quite vague.
Yeah, careful googling big gun. You might get shot. Don't do it at work.
Well, I've got some flexibility anyway, because we tend to work in the old Marvel way. So, Roger will write full scripts. We'll basically go to the pub, talk about the story. Roger will tell me what he wants on each page, and I'll go back. I'll storyboard it from there, and draw it, and then give it back to Roger, and he'll dialogue it from there.
Wow, that's really cool. Because not many people do that now, do they? Most people work from full script.
Comics, I think it works really well, and it allows the artists to bring some of their own ideas and some of their own inspiration into it. They're not locked down to a specific thing that the writer wants, and I've always found that working that way makes comics better. And also dialoguing, it means that the dialogue will match the pictures properly, because you can match the expression, you can match the mood of it. And it brings
but it can work in theatre and cinema. Why shouldn't it work? You know, improv.
It's being inspired by what's on the page, isn't it? Vincent could add something to the art that inspires an idea for dialogue that wasn't there before.
Frequently that happens. So I mean, that's why we have a code thread credit, because we always plot the things together, usually at the pub, and as we come up with each page, I tend to kind of generalize, so I need this scene to happen, and it needs to be about 4 pages, and then as we sort of break it down, it's Vince who turns that into a proper fully fledged scene, which I can then dialogue. So he brings as much into it as I do.
And do you, Roger, find, I mean, you might have a lot of knowledge already, but do you find you need to research like procedural stuff to tell the story? No, you don't worry about that.
No, I was going to. When we first started, I was going to try and do that, but I just found it so boring. And I thought, I'll sort of another couple of Columbo episodes. That'll get it right. So it's all unrealistic. Lots of procedures. It's completely wrong. That would never happen. So we tried to get it right on a TV basis. We think it would just swing if it happened on TV, and if you think it would, go for it. So
also I suppose with it being a comic, it's not as complex as a TV show, I think it kind of I that's how I would work if I was a writer. I'd research everything down to the tiniest bit of equipment each of the people were using, but then if you're not careful, it just makes the story too complicated.
But it looks convincing. I mean, you've got Stockos in there, you've got the bobbies that are helping them out. All in there. It looks good. It looks there's police chasers.
Those same shows, so we know what happens in those shows. Who knows if there's anything like real life? It may not be anything like that at all. No. But since we've all seen those sort of scenes, then that's where we've constructed in Harker too, to make it seem real from a TV or a film point of view.
But it's not like when we'd watch an old movie, an American movie set in London. And it would just be preposterous to just get it.
Everybody's got really extreme, like almost sounds Australian accents.
They've got better in more recent years, but they used to just. I think they used to just have this idea of what the UK was and what London looked like. And
I mean, some of the wonderful Basil Rathbone Sherlock Holmeses. I love them, but they're very Mr. Holmes.
But even
We have a broad idea for Harker story set in New York. We actually went to New York and took quite a few photographs over there, which is the reverse of that, where Harker critics are the ones who are not in step with the Americans, not understanding it and getting the culture shock from it. Just kind of play the opposite side of that. It's like Columbo in London, but from the other point of view, really, reverse, I suppose.
But having said that, I think it would be good to get the American side of it right, and not have Americans acting in the way we think they would, but actually find out how they would react to a couple of idiot London coppers being bumbling around, and get that right. But yeah, it'd be interesting.
I think it is quite hard, isn't it, to be accurate culturally on a lot of stuff like that, because we all laugh at the Americans, when they ever, even in more recent comics, you see it sometimes. I say recent, in the 90s. I remember a Spider-Man comic where he went to London and everybody was wearing peak caps. There was fog everywhere. Everyone was saying "Core blimey," and we laugh at it. We think it's ridiculous, but it's probably quite hard, isn't it? Because how many of us have actually spent enough time in another culture to truly be able to represent it, as it would be to a local person? We might think, oh, we're well traveled. I've been to America a couple of times. I know what American culture's like. I can write stories set in America. I'm sure they would find it equally as hilarious because we would also rely on stereotypes, I'm sure.
Well, yeah, and also most stories rely on stereotypes to tell the story. So there would be an element of that. But even so, I think writing London characters saying "Core blimey" in the 90s. They've only got to watch a few English TV shows or films, and they know that's not what we do.
But it's also
to go to America and start being really British just to piss the Americans off.
Yeah,
I was talking in code to in very, very British slang, just because he knew that the Americans wouldn't understand it. So we'll play that sort of thing too, but that's quite a ways off.
But when Columbo went to England, he ended up in the Shakespearean theatre.
Yes.
So that's obviously, he went to New Scotland Yard, and then there was a murder with, on a black man.
Yeah.
But that's how the Americans perceived it. It's like England, Shakespeare straight away.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just of all the places he could have gone.
Yeah.
And everything's really close together as well, according to them. That's the other thing, isn't it? It's like, oh, they could just go to from England to Scotland in like 10 minutes.
We had just next door to Palace, aren't we? And there's a Shakespearean theatre just around the corner.
Oh, absolutely.
But that's just coincidence. That's not British in general.
Oh, dear. Well, guys, I have to say,
you never guess what? Look at that.
What?
We've nearly had our hour.
Well, I was just going to say, we nearly had our hour. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you guys, and learning more about Harker and about the way you work and stuff like that. I always like hearing how different artists and writers put stuff together and how they work together and all that sort of thing. So it's really
nice
to
keep our publisher happy. One last plug for the Kickstarter.
Yes.
Yeah. There's currently a Kickstarter on right now for the Book of Solomon Part 2. And if you haven't read Part 1, you can get Part 1 with that Kickstarter as well. So go to Kickstarter, look up Harker, the Book of Solomon, and we'll be there.
And very reasonable prices.
Very reasonable prices. Yes.
Very reasonable.
Yes.
How much is the book? If you just want to get the book, how much is that?
Yeah.
No, I don't know.
I don't know.
Don't know about that. That's publishers' business. We don't know about that sort of rubbish. Well, guys, get yourselves onto the Kickstarter and find out. And are there any sort of cool extras? I always ask this, but I always want to know. Extras that you can get on the Kickstarter.
Loads. There's all sorts of prints and stuff adding to it. Cool.
Steve is fantastic for putting prints on.
Yeah.
So every time they hit a target,
you add prints.
Yeah.
And is the artwork all by you, Vince, or any guest artists?
Most of it is, although Rog did a piece of artwork for the last one, which apparently was very popular. So that he'll be doing another one. Which
I think Steve's going to ask you, Andrew, actually. I think propositions by Steve Stewart Pinup as well. I don't know.
That would be cool.
But it's
there's a bit of a rough painting. Sneak peek.
A sneak peek, yeah.
That's me putting the rough down.
I mean, I'm very tempted myself because I have got. I did get the Titan edition, so I am tempted to get the.
You've got to do it, mate.
Yeah.
You've got to keep the wolf away from our doors. Yeah. If we don't make another £5,000, we're not going to get paid.
Well, there you go. You heard it here, guys. You know, support these artists. Support these artists. Get this
brilliant. He wanted £1,000. He got his £1,000 within a day, didn't it? Easily, easily done.
That's incredible.
He's a craftsman at it. He's brilliant on Kickstarter, is Steve.
He is. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining us tonight. I really do appreciate it.
Inviting us on. Yeah.
You're absolutely welcome, and all the best with the Kickstarter. And I was going to ask Sam to play the VT, but I actually think that he hasn't been there for quite some time now. I think he's disappeared.
Maybe there's a murder.
Maybe there's been a murder. There's been a murder.
They're slumped.
So I'm going to run the VT. So I'll say good night and have a great evening, guys.